We focused on what matters, which is talking to voters. And we talked to voters who had letters next to their name, and we knew they weren't going to necessarily agree with us, especially at a time when teaching and education had become much more polarized. But we continued to focus on the issues. And my experience was the only, career educator in the race.
We are Louisiana Indivisible. From New Orleans to North Louisiana, from Baton Rouge to the Bayou, from Shreveport to St. Bernard Parish, from Lake Charles to Lafayette to Leesville, together we can defend our democracy. We Are Louisiana Indivisible is highlighting people, politicians, and organizations across the state and region that understand there are no kings but king cakes in Louisiana, and that y'all will always mean all. Listen, share with your friends and neighbors, and help us work for a better tomorrow in Louisiana and beyond. Welcome to We Are Louisiana Indivisible. I'm your host, Joel Sharpton, and I am so excited to have our guest on today. Welcome to the show, Lauren Jewett.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Lauren, we've been highlighting a lot of candidates, progressive candidates across the state, and I'm excited to continue doing so. I think it is very, very important that we get your names, your platforms, your personalities out there in a more major way. I don't know about you. I see all the time on Facebook, who are we running against these candidates? There are a lot of you out there that are trying to make good runs at these offices. We need to spread the word more.
Yes, I see that too. I'm on social media a lot. I mean, I'm on all of the social media accounts and platforms. I got a TikTok before I announced my race. I'm still learning how to TikTok, but I've been on the other social media platforms for a while. And I do see that from people saying like, who are the people running? Or just recently, I think the state party put out a post about some of the candidates who have announced, and a couple people had commented like, these candidates need to be more active on social media, or we need to get their name out there. And I totally agree. I also see that as like, voter education, right? Like, how do we look up a candidate that is running for office? I think it's pretty easy. If you looked up first congressional district, like candidates, like my name will probably come up. And so, or even if you just knew my name and Googled me, you'd find lots of things, because this is not my first go around running for office. But running for office at the federal level requires a ton of resources. And, lots of people have been giving their thoughts, insights, like opinions. And it's different when you're in the candidate seat. People are suggesting billboards and radio ads and TV ads. And I'm just like, we're just not there yet in terms of fundraising. And I know you've had other guests on the podcast or on the show who are in a similar boat where, yes, we would love to do that stuff. We were running against some people who have a whole lot of amount of money. And we're about running our campaign in a way that we're going to put the money in a way towards what we really need, which is voter outreach and, yes, visibility. But we have to do visibility in a different way when we don't have $5 million like the incumbent does. So we're glad that people are starting to take an interest in this congressional cycle now that we're officially in 2026. But we've been running this campaign for several months. So it's been obviously at the top of our mind, maybe not the top of all the voters' minds, but we know in Louisiana that we have an inordinate amount of elections. And so it's just been, okay, the closer we get to our election, then that is the one where people are then starting to take note. How do I do research on my candidates? Because then they're going to be casting their ballot and they need to be informed.
Lauren, you're 100% right. I remind people all the time, this state actually has plenty of Democrats registered, although they do try to flush those voter registration rolls regularly, don't they? But we've got plenty of Democrats registered. It's about getting people to show up at the polls and to actually go and vote. There is a general sense in the state, and especially outside of the state, that the Louisiana elections are a foregone conclusion. And because of that, sometimes, luckily, we can catch the Republican Party sort of sleeping. I think we caught them sleeping on the amendment election last year at the state level, where there was a hot mic moment where Mike Johnson and I believe it was President Trump were heard talking about Mike was surprised. The polls said they were going to be like 26, 27% turnout. We beat that, I think, in the end. But we did that not because of even you or I. People who are politically active sometimes get tuned out by our neighbors. It's the random folks, the average Joes and Janes, that need to hear about an issue and say, yes, I care, and then speak up to their neighbors and
Yeah.
their surrounding communities, online and offline. That's how
Yes.
we can move the needle on any of these issues.
Yep.
Quickly, before we get to your race specifically, and Lauren is, by the way, if you don't know Lauren, check her out online, laurenjewett.com. But you are running in Louisiana's first congressional district, and we're going to get to that race and your opponent and the primaries and all of that in a moment. Of the candidates, so that we've spoken to recently, you are the first one that I've recorded after and I'm going to call it murder of Alex. Renee Good had been shot, I believe, by the time that both of the previous recordings had happened, and
Right.
those were commented on during the episode. But I want to ask you, first and foremost, how are you feeling in this moment in America? And do you get the sense, I want to try to stay positive as often as I can. Doom and gloom doesn't bring people out to action. I don't think doom and gloom gets people demotivated. So I feel a sense, Lauren, that the tenor of the conversation has changed, and that there are, in fact, a group of moderates. I really thought there weren't any left in the country, but there are a group of moderates that have suddenly stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, I did see those videos. I saw those two people killed in an extrajudicial way. And then I saw the administration, President Trump, Miller, Nome, et cetera, tell us that we didn't see what we saw. And I really do get a sense that things have changed. Is that the way you're feeling? What are your thoughts on these two specific incidents? Although they're not the only ones across the country, obviously, they seem to be the most egregious. And if you do have the sense that that momentum has shifted, how do we take advantage of it, and how do we continue pushing this conversation forward so that we don't settle with just perhaps a Bovino, firing and a Nome censure or impeachment, perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm seeing a lot of things just saying that, like, how is it still January? It feels like it's been the longest month, and I feel like we keep saying that. Like, we said that in 2025. Now this month of the first month of 2026 feels so long with everything that's been occurring. Mm, I didn't even really hear about what happened until like midday. I was out all day in the morning putting Christmas trees out in the Barataria Basin, like doing coastal restoration work. And then I got home and it was doing fundraising calls. And it wasn't until after I finished those calls that I was speaking with my campaign team, and they said, "Do you want to make a statement on what happened in Minneapolis?" And I said, "Well, what happened?" Like, and the only thing that came through my phone earlier in the day was I'm on a lot of group chats with politically minded folks, and something came through that just said, "I recommend you don't watch the video." I have not watched the video, but I read everything that has occurred. I just try not to I try to limit my intake of, like, actual violence that I am putting into my own, like, eyesight and brain, but, like, from everything I've read and from everything that has been stated factually, this was literally a murder, and by federal agents, by somebody who is a helper, right? Someone who's in a helping profession, nursing. My mother's a nurse and also a union member, right? Like, and I am a union member, true and true. And so I think to your question about us seeing these things happen with Renee Good and with Alex, I think I'm saying his last name. Is it Pretty or Pretty? Like,
Petty.
I don't I'm saying his last name. Yeah, Pretty. These aren't the first instances of state sanctioned violence. Like, it just happens right now. We have phones, people can see this. And, like, of course, like, I want to honor the fact that we have had other murders happen at the hands of ICE, especially of Black and brown people who have not gotten the same, news media cycle, but we also have to, like, name that, and also name the fact that, again, there has been state sanctioned violence in other decades in history that we have not had actual video footage of, but we have had, like, there's other accounts of that, right? I have a background in a degree in history. And so,
Philando Castile incident is one that I was reminded of in the last week, which I had honestly genuinely forgot that in the long list of incidents. But that, at least, here's the thing that occurs to me that does make this different, in that this was totally unnecessary in the regular functioning of government. In the Philando Castile incident, it was a police overreach, a police overreaction. We could talk about the nature of the unrequired stop probably for that individual altogether. But in this case, this is the federal administration sending in an untrained, unready police force, quote unquote, in ICE to do something that's not necessary. Like, I want to remind people, Minnesota is a long way from any border. Like, this is not an issue about open borders. And this was purposeful retribution
Yes.
for a political action, and
Yeah.
that's why these people were there to begin with. So when these and goodness gracious, I'm getting on my soapbox now, Lauren, but the thing about Renee in particular had like dropped her kids off to school. Alex was not out of protest. He was going about his day and stopped to help someone who was being assaulted effectively by ICE agents. Like, it was the egregious nature of these two actions. The fact that they're white, I think, did make a difference in the coverage of the incidents. But the egregious nature of the actions is hard for anybody who does watch the footage and watch it play out to make an honest. The mental gymnastics are just difficult to imagine at this point for anybody looking to justify it.
Yeah.
It's such an insane moment. And it's good to remind us all of that. Hey, you're not alone when you feel like this is all hard to imagine and believe and stomach.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a hard weekend, and of course, like, here in Louisiana and other parts of the country, it's been very cold, so people were inside and probably watching the news and, looking at their phones, and, I mean, ultimately, and I said this right after Renee Good's murder, that these are, like, these are our neighbors, these are people in our community, and, like, if it's not them today, it's another person tomorrow, and we need to have transparency and accountability and investigation for what has occurred. Ultimately, we need to reform the way in which we're even addressing the issue of immigration and get rid of ICE. Like, it's not serving our communities for any kind of purpose of safety, which is what it's under the guise of safety. They keep saying this is about public safety and this is about getting criminals off the street and all this, but I'm like, it's not creating any of that for us. And then you're detaining children, or using them as bait, and then calling the fact that they're saying that they're I mean, my congressman saying that the boy's father is a criminal and he had no criminal background, and he was trying to go through the asylum process, and like the process is not being recognized by the current administration. It's just so much nonsense that does not honor anyone's humanity. And even the night before the what happened on Saturday, I was at an event in New Orleans speaking on behalf of my union, for what has been happening with ICE and happening with teachers and happening with families of kids, and just speaking in solidarity with Minnesota. And I mean, it hadn't even been less than 24 hours from that event on Friday evening, and that happened. And it's like, it just reminds me that we have to keep getting in the streets and we have to keep saying that this is not okay, and we will not accept this from our government, and we will not accept this from our elected officials who are there to serve us, not to serve anybody else, but to serve us. We are the people that put these elected officials in office. They work for us. And I know they're working for other people at times, they're working for other interests, but ultimately we need accountable leadership, and we need leadership that is also going to call it out and not try to cowtail and try to be a sycophant, because that's not what I'm about. But that's what I'm seeing from my own congressional representative. And I can't stand for that. I wish that he would say something different than just double down on the fact that ICE is doing a credible and good job. No, they are clearly not doing a credible and good job when they are killing somebody in the middle of the street on live camera.
It is an interesting moment in that the Louisiana delegation, both in the House and the Senate, have been so loudly in support of this administration. Largely, they have come to sort of the center of a lot of the Republican power. And so I think if the national progressive movement can just take a look at what the possibilities are here, we could spend a little money in these Louisiana races from national organizations and genuinely could make a big dent in the MAGA power structure. Scalise and Higgins and Mike Johnson, especially, but like up and down the road, both those senators, you know, they've got races coming up soon enough. Cassidy was shorter than Kennedy. Let's talk a little bit about your race, though, specifically, Lauren. Give us a little bit about your background and how you first decided to get into politics. I've been a political junkie my whole life. I've been a progressive activist for a little bit more than a decade, I would say. And yet I think to myself, my odds are so long running for any races around here. I haven't gotten into it. What was the final straw for you to say, yeah, I'm going to step out there and put my name and my neck out on the line?
Well, I shared a little bit of that. I've been doing a lot of meet and greets, so I've been sharing this quite a bit. I have a background in political science. That's what my degree is, undergrad. I wanted to go to law school all my life, since like middle school, got into law school, but I grew up in New York and I got into schools in New York and I said, I cannot do this winter another 3 years. And I had the chance to move here through my teaching program that I was also applying for at the same time. And I'd never been to Louisiana, but I just felt that if I didn't come here and do this after college, then I would always be regretting it. I'd always be wondering, hey, like, what if I had moved to like Louisiana? Like, so I moved here 22. I didn't know anybody here in the state. Knew nobody in New Orleans. And like I said, had never been here. It was 2009. So I started teaching. I've taught in the river parishes out in St. John the Baptist Parish and worked there for a few years. And then started working in New Orleans. I worked in the charter school system, and now I currently work at our only public school in the city of New Orleans, which is the Leah Chase School, and recently worked with my colleagues and the community to keep that school open from closing potentially next year. So we have worked very hard to save our public school, which we understand, nationally is something that is very much at play. Moving here, and not being from here, I always, you know, felt, okay, how do I be respectful to people who really are born here, raised here, call it home, and how do I make it my home, right? It's become my home. I've been here for 17 years. I have become an adult here. When I went to college, I didn't go too far down the street from where I grew up. So this was really my place where I became an adult and had and built my profession and my career. And so in terms of learning how to understand what happened, especially in New Orleans post Katrina with education. I was very grateful to be a member of the teachers union here, and have been a very active member of the teachers union here, also being on leadership there for 9 years. And I learned from my elders and from retirees what happens to them post Katrina. And I learned from them about the political landscape of how that intersected. I also spent a lot of time learning how to do the political process as a union member. Felt like I say my political education really came from my union. When I talk about active participatory democracy and political education in action, I came from my union. Of course, I had a degree in political science, but of course, that's being in the books and everything. But in action, I learned it from being on the ground in my union, learning how the endorsement process worked, learning how to get out there and help candidates that we endorsed who made commitments to supporting educators and school staff and made commitments to public education in a city at the time that was trying to fight for public education, well before all this stuff has happened on a national level. So I learned how people ran for office through my union. And of course, when you start doing that enough, you start canvassing and working with folks, they start asking, hey, when are you going to run for office? And I had a friend who was a teacher at the time and also fellow union member. And, she kept kind of urging me and saying, like, you got to run for office. Like, she kept, like, making hashtags with my name and the year. And I'm like, okay, not 2018. No, not 2020. Especially in the post 2020, 2016, climate where we really felt like tested politically, and how do we stand up for our rights. And you saw people becoming more engaged and active. And I was saying during COVID, I got a lot more media experience. We talked a little bit before we started the call of, people being me doing media interviews. And I did a lot of media interviews during COVID. We were getting calls to our union office. They were very curious about how teachers' minds were feeling, how we were, what our mindsets were, what our feelings were about school closures and school reopening and all the things that were happening during the pandemic. And I, did an interview here and there, and then I just happened to be available a lot of times when they were asking, and I was willing to do it, right? Because it's not just, can you be available to do an interview? Are you willing to put your face out there and speak on a contentious topic? We know it was contentious at the time, but at the same point, a lot of educators' voices were not being considered in a lot of decision making. We know that's very important, and why teachers often choose to join unions, and so that our voices together are stronger. So I felt very proud to represent my union and represent the voices of educators in the city about what we were feeling. And I was an I'm an elementary teacher slash middle school teacher now, but at the time I worked with younger kids, third grade, fourth grade, and so we were some of the teachers that went back first when it came time to open schools. So yeah, I mean, I did all that, and then getting a sense of my voice too, and how to advocate on a better, different level. Probably the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, there became a vacancy open on my local school board. The person who had been in there for 3 terms was stepping down a year early, and in that case, they don't hold a special election if there's less than a year left on the term. So the board gets to appoint a person to the vacant seat. They did that. I happened to be at home that first week of 2022. I tested positive for COVID. And I was hearing a lot of chatter and noise. People started messaging me and said, hey, they're like, hey, someone got appointed to the school board and we don't know who this person is. But it seems like they're not a great candidate or a great person to be in there because, they had said a lot of inflammatory things about teachers. So some teachers and parents in the district, well, I think a lot of them had emailed the board and the superintendent and said, like, this is not who we want on a school board. So then they reopened up the process, and I contacted the union there, contacted some other folks and said, I think I'm going to apply for the vacancy and see what happens. And they did public interviews. It was 9 folks. And when I went back and watched the interviews, they were all public, but I couldn't see what everybody was saying during the actual real time. And that process really indicated to me that I was more qualified than I thought I was. Like, I watched all the interviews and I said, no, I deserve to be an elected officer, deserve to be in a seat representing kids and families, and that's my passion. And so I didn't ultimately get appointed to the seat, but I decided, and that was in January, I said, I'm going to run for the seat in the fall because the seat was going to be open, no incumbent. I learned that it's easier to run for an open seat than running against an incumbent. And so I said, okay, I think I'm going to do this. And I was enrolled at the time in a training program for Democratic women called Emerge. There are different chapters in different states around the country, but it had a chapter at that time in Louisiana. I was learning some of the ropes about how to be a candidate that I didn't really know a lot about, like fundraising and some other things I didn't have a lot of skill set in, and engaged in my campaign. And I ran my campaign, got signatures to get on the ballot so I didn't have to have my ballot fees, worked on building my website. I launched my campaign in May. And then I was gone abroad for 2 months doing my master's degree in England. And I was fundraising from abroad. I was doing what I could 6 hours ahead, and then came back and hit the ground running. And I had a fantastic time running that campaign. It was pretty much from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because I made my runoff that year in that race by 10 votes. By 10 votes. And I tell that all the time when people ask me about how I got into office. And I say, well, and why your vote matters. We knocked thousands of doors. We were out fundraised. We were outspent. But we made that runoff because we focused on what matters, which is talking to voters. And we talked to voters who had letters next to their name, and we knew they weren't going to necessarily agree with us, especially at a time when teaching and education had become much more polarized. But we continued to focus on the issues and my experience. I was the only career educator in the race. So did that race. I didn't end up winning the runoff. It was, nothing else was on the ballot other than my race and some constitutional amendments, which is a hard sell the second week of
Yeah.
December. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed because I poured everything I had into that race. I was full-time teaching at the time while running for public office. And, I was going out and knocking doors when I was just tired after work. And but my friends are like, you know what? It could come down to a couple votes because we've seen that in local races. So within like 3 weeks of that race and like losing the runoff, people start asking me again, "Are you gonna run again?" And I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
tired. Very tired, but, I'll consider it." And at that year was of 2023, that was the gubernatorial year, and I had originally wanted to run for the state school board. It just happened that the local school board seat had become vacant and early, and I had learned kinda about it, and I'd always had my eyes set on that state school board seat because I knew that the person in the seat was eventually going to be term limited. He was in the seat for 16 years. So I kind of thought about it and then I was like, you know what? Like, I'll get the paperwork in process and I'll give it to my friend and she can take it to Baton Rouge. Cause again, I was graduating with my master's that year out of state in Vermont and I knew I wasn't going to be there for qualifying. So I left my paperwork and my stuff with her and I just said, I'll give you a call if I feel like I'm going to get in the race. Cause I had infrastructure built up. I had money remaining from the previous race and we got in we ended up running that race. I thought, okay, well, it's the gubernatorial year and it's the legislative cycle year. Like, surely, like, people will be coming out for like all
Get
these
a little
state
more
races, like
turnout.
treasurer
Yeah.
and attorney general and all the things. And we know how that turned out with the turnout. The turnout was not great. And we didn't even have a force a runoff in the governor's race. And I learned a lot about how candidates can not be supported by the organizations that are supposed to be supporting them and also building the infrastructure. So that was a little disappointing because I got in the race mainly because I believe that races and elections should not go uncontested. And I felt that from what I was hearing that there weren't going to be a lot of other candidates in the race and there weren't. It was me and a Republican candidate who is a termed out legislator who side note, if anybody lives in Bessie District 1, which is what I ran for, that seat is vacant now, and there will be a special election. It is a primary election. It's a party primary seat now because the person I ran against is now leading up the U.S. Mint. So he was nominated by President Trump and he was confirmed by the Senate think late November, so he resigned from the Bessie board in December. And, that's his dream job. He's a rare coin collector or numismatist. I'm a career special education teacher. This is our voters voted based probably, I don't know, maybe voted based on name recognition. Again, the person he was a termed out legislator. His dad was a state senator, so he had name recognition and had the R next to his name. And in a district that is very similar to the congressional district.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't have any regrets about the races I've run. I haven't won them, but I know how to run a campaign. Like I know that what it takes to talk to voters. But both elections, I just didn't have a ton of resources that were necessary, and that was the challenge.
I think, Lauren, you're a perfect example, though, that we need more people who are willing to spend the time and energy and the put your heart and soul into these small campaigns, potentially long odds campaigns, because without somebody to step up and do that, we are giving up the whole idea of public service to
Yeah,
those who can't afford to do so full time. And that is, in some ways, the way that our system was structured from the beginning, right? Rich landowners were the only ones that got to vote once upon a time, never mind run for office. But we don't want a system where only the wealthy, where only the privileged few can run for office. And if the people like Lauren who maybe are facing long odds, who also have a full-time job and, oversee out-of-state studies and things like that to take care of. If folks like you don't run, then we are just saying we want the elites, we want the oligarchs to run our government, which is, for me, I am absolutely against that,
Me
whatever party
too.
you
I
affiliate with.
I am against that. I also am a courage candidate with this group called Citizens Impeachment. We're anti-fascism, we're anti-oligarchy, anti-tyranny, we are pro-impeachment, like, and it's a lot of candidates who are running in this cycle for Congress, and very, like, everyday people who have, the same challenges that I just spoke about, running at the local and state level. And I'm just a doer. Like, that's why I think I got in this particular race for Congress. I had people approach me and ask me again, are you gonna run again? After I lost that state school board race, I was like, I had people ask about me getting involved in the DPAC at the parish level and at the DSCC level on the state level. So I ran for those seats. I ran unopposed for my DSCC seat. I did run for at large and won for the DPAC in Jefferson. And it's been difficult. It's party building work is not glamorous. It's difficult. It's trying to build and unify a lot of personalities and a lot of issues. And I mean, our state is very diverse. And I mean, I've just really focused a lot on try to just get people educated about what's on the ballot, be registered, know their rights as a voter, and as a constituent. And that's been my whole mission, right? I look at things through the lens of an educator and try to make things feel a little bit more demystified, because we do have this crazy election cycle in the state of Louisiana, and it's constant. And it's like, okay, even this race for Congress, people are like, I don't know if I live in your district. And so I just have the Go Vote app on my phone always. It lives on there. Um, I delete other apps, but I don't delete that app very often. And so I know how to look them up and help them. And ultimately, I never said I wasn't not going to run again. I just did not see myself running for Congress, because I know how much it took for the local race and the state race. And then I know that you got to be constantly raising money and have a team. And so when I was approached by some folks about considering this race, I said, I need money. I need someone to find me
You
money.
need
And I said, I
support.
just don't know if I can do this and work full time. So we are looking into potentially taking some time off after my school year ends this year to really give it everything I got. I'm a saver, so I have saved money. I mean, I hate to say that I will be maybe taking some months off of income to do this, but I just need to know that there's no regrets again, and that I've done everything I can, because at the end of the day, um, I get up for work each and every morning to serve my students and ensure that they have a better world, because otherwise, what am I even doing as a teacher? And we know the world that they're about to inherit, or they are inheriting, and it's not a great picture. And so I can't tell my students to go live out their dreams when there will be no world for them to dream in. And that's why I'm running for the race. It's not so much more now than just the issues that I would fight on a local school board. And I encourage people to go run for their school boards, because there are issues at play there. But I think I've been there, and I've run for those positions, and I have a lens that is now wider about how these issues are now impacting. All these issues are impacting children and families. So it's not just about, okay, like over testing, and we do need to fight for what's in our curriculum and the truthful history, and we do need to fight for educator pay raises. But those are things that can be done at a local, state level, and federal level. And we've seen that, because they keep saying education is a state's issue, but they're encroaching into what our states are doing and our local districts and municipalities are doing. It's so much more for me now. It's like my kids are worried about if they're going to see their friends the next day because ICE is in New Orleans, or if they're going to be separated from their family who's supposed to come pick them up in the car rider line. And like, my students are worried about getting their next meal, and their families are worried about healthcare access, and our neighbors are worried about the next big storm is going to decimate their house or increase their insurance rate. Everyone's worried about going to the grocery store and being able to pay for everything that's in their cart, or do they have to put something back on the shelf because they just can't afford it? Like, these are real issues that extend so much beyond the classroom. And so, I mean, that is why I'm getting in the race. And I just felt like I didn't see somebody in the halls of Congress fighting for my students and fighting for my colleagues and fighting for me in the district, which is a very vulnerable district. I continue to say this in every forum that I'm in. It is a vulnerable district. It goes very far out into the coast, and we need to protect people. And I do that every day. I fight for our most vulnerable children. I am a special education teacher, and that's who these cuts to the Department of Education are impacting. That's what these cuts to healthcare access are going to disproportionately affect. It's going to affect people with disabilities, the elderly. Some of my students are not cared for by their family member, their mom or their dad. They're cared for by an older aunt or uncle or grandparent. And so it's like all these issues that people are just not thinking. What is the like? There might be a good, they might have good intentions with policy that gets passed, but what's the impact? What's the impact that ends up living out? And the people on the ground are not the oligarchs, not the people who have access to billions of dollars, not the corporations, is the people on the ground who live and breathe these policy impacts. So that's who I'm fighting for. And I feel that if my congressman can come after my job, then he needs to be put on notice that we will apply for his job, which we are going to do in 2 weeks when we go to qualify in Baton Rouge. And we're going to fight for that job, and we're going to give it everything we can, because we're fighting for everybody's jobs, because everyone's jobs and their wallets are in a vulnerable position.
You couldn't have said it any better, Lauren. Quickly, if you're listening to this and you are looking to help Lauren and get aligned with her campaign or just stay up to date with it, laurenjewett.com is where you can find her. And we'll have a link for that in the show notes as well. Lauren, quickly, though, tell us about the dates. So we will have a party primary, I'm assuming, coming up in the spring, right? And then the general election will be in November?
Yes. So we are now under a closed party primary system in the state of Louisiana. We have not had that in 16 years. Actually, 2008 was the last year that we had closed party primaries, which was actually the year that my congressman, Steve Scalise, was elected into the Congress. Prior to that, he was in the legislature for 12 years. So I have been telling people he's been in office for 28 years. I'm almost 39. I'll be 39 in March, so I'll be 39 in the middle of the election. But if you do your math, it's like over 70% of my life he's been in elected office. And we need fresh ideas in there. We need better dynamic leadership. I'm a go-getter. I work hard. So May 16th is the election for the party primary here in the state of Louisiana. We will be going to qualify in Baton Rouge. The qualifying window is February 11th through the 13th, and then that'll kick off the campaign. Really, I mean, we've been rolling since September 1st, Labor Day. We announced on Labor Day because we believe in unions and working families, but it really is going to be a little bit more, I think, tangible for people once they know who the field is. Right now, we know that there's some other Democrats in my race who have filed FEC paperwork, but we won't know for sure what the field looks like. So May 16th is that election date for the primary, and then November 3rd is going to be the general election. So we're working hard to be that nominee come May 16th to face Steve Scalise and give him a run for his money, because we know that if we're organized enough, we can really move some numbers in this district. And it's really about showing that and giving people a reason to say, oh, like, this is possible. We're running to win, of course, but we're also running to move those numbers to show that we have fighters here in Louisiana. I think we get a lot of I read this and hear this a lot about southern states, like especially deep south states. Is just like, oh, like, they're not fighting back enough. It's like, but the forces that we're fighting against are like really hard, and we have some of the most most dynamic examples of organizing, right? We have had people, the traditions and legacy of organizing in the deep south, like the forces that people have had to fight against and resist. People forget that when they make those very generalized statements about the results they see. Well, that's for a reason. It is by
Yeah.
design that they make it hard because we actually our resistance is very strong here, but there are also forces that try to divide us. And so we need to come together and really unify against the common enemy, which is fascism and tyranny and authoritarianism, because that is what is trying to divide us and then pick us off. But really, we need to be unified against that.
I love it. I can't wait to see you redecorate that office for the first congressional district of Louisiana this fall,
It'd
Lauren.
be
Or I
really
guess it'll be early next year, wouldn't it? Yeah.
gonna look like a
All right.
teacher's office.
LaurenJewett.com. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. And thank you for continuing to stand up. That's the message that I want people to take away. Anytime you go to an organizational meeting or a city town hall or a school board meeting or a protest, the folks that show up aren't the only ones that want to show up. They're the only ones that had the time, the resources, and the energy to show up. That's what it comes down to. So if you're like Lauren and you're willing to stand up and have your voice heard, share these voices, share these issues that matter, and keep pushing things forward in the state. That's what we're all about. Lauren, thank you again for your time tonight. Thank you for jumping through all our scheduling hoops.
Yeah. My last thing is keep showing up. That's the mantra. You have to keep showing up. Keep showing up.